to a very casual reading wrap up. Hey folks, my name is Jen, and yeah, today we're just a little bit casual because this week has been kind of crazy so far. So here we are. We have a bookshelf in the background at least, so that's something. I will apologize if my voice sounds off at any point. I've done a lot of laughing and talking over the past couple of days, and I feel like I'm starting to get like laryngitis or something, so just bear with me. So October for reading honestly was not really that impressive as far as like quantity wise goes, at least. Quality fucking stellar, but quantity, yeah, not so much. Basically in October I read a total of 4 books. So first, I guess maybe I'll talk about the one book I DNF'd just briefly. It was actually a book that, it was an audiobook that I started a couple of months ago, and I tried to go back to it last month and just could not really get through it. It was Elemental Thief, and the book is by Rachel Morgan, and it's like this urban fantasy romance deal. And I think part of my problem might have been the audiobook. Like the narrator was very like emotionless and stuff, and I think maybe that was part of it. But I also just didn't really like the descriptions and the way it was written. It just did not sound like really my cup of tea, so I ended up DNFing it, which is kind of disappointing because it did sound like the concept of it sounded really interesting, but I just wasn't digging it. As far as other books that I started in October and have not finished, I'm still making my way through them. I started reading The Witches by Roald Dahl. I only got a couple of chapters and I'm on chapter, they're not numbered. It's called Frizzled Like a Fritter. It's page 65, and I only got that far and I stopped because I was more into a couple of other books, and I might continue reading this in November, or this might be on my nightstand of shame for a couple of months until I decide to pick it up again. I don't know, we'll find out. And then the other book that I got part of the way through, which I am still actively reading, is The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. I am on, I don't know what chapter, but I'm on page 64. So I'm still actively reading this, still actively enjoying it, and yeah, I will be probably finishing this in November, fairly soon. Also, let's see what else. The Secret of Chimneys by Agatha Christie is my lunchtime read, and still reading that. I'm actually almost done with it, and it's pretty intriguing. And I also started Pyramids by Terry Pratchett, which is part of the Discworld series, and I'm only like, I want to say 30 pages in or something like that, and yeah, I'm enjoying it so far. But that's also like another lunchtime read, so it's like one of those, it's slow going. I'll probably be reading it for a little bit. As for the books that I actually finished in Spooky Month, let's talk about those. So for 3 of these, I'm not gonna get crazy in depth, or at least I'm gonna try not to, because if you want my in-depth thoughts about them, they were featured in the video I made about some of my all-time favorite books, and those were my favorite horror books. So the first thing that I completed in October was The Shining by Stephen King. This is a book that I reread pretty much every October, or have for the past few years. If you don't know what this book is about, this is following the Torrance family, Jack, Wendy, and Danny, as they become the winter caretakers for the Overlook Hotel, which is in Colorado, and they kind of are isolated and become snowbound up at the hotel, dealing with their own personal demons, as the negative forces of the hotel kind of make themselves known. So this is a book that, yeah, like I've said before, and you've probably heard me talk about this ad nauseum, and I'm really sick of it by now, but I love this book. It's one of my favorite books of all time. I annotated it actually last year and felt that not only did I get so much more out of the story in general through the annotation, but I also felt like I picked up some writing cues from the annotation and delving in more and getting like an idea of how Stephen King writes like foreshadowing and ties things together and stuff like that. I took some writing cues from it as well, which I found to be really cool and helpful. Yeah, I love this book. I love how utterly creepy it is, even though for the most part it no longer scares me, except for just there's like 2 particular scenes that still freak me the fuck out, and I need to read them in the daylight because I just cannot deal with it in nighttime. But I love how eerie it is. I love how much the Overlook feels like a character itself. I really enjoy the looks into all 3 characters. All of them are flawed, although Danny maybe less so because he's just a little kid. He's 5 years old. He's talented in the way he shines, or his psychic abilities. And one of the characters at one point says that they also shine and that they are a searchlight, and Danny is like a fucking beacon. He has a lot of power, and he's just a little kid. So him being flawed is like, there's much less of it, because I mean, he's just like, his parents are a lot more so. And I really liked kind of ways that King delves into flawed characters and people dealing with trying to face their demons, past, present, their relationships with each other, their family unit, as complicated as it might be. And I also really love that this book is, at the heart of it, very much a horror story. It's very, that's what it is, but there's also a lot of heart in it as well, and it's also kind of, it's a family drama, and it's kind of a tragedy, and it's, there's just a lot going on in this book that I really, truly love. So, yeah, I love giving this a reread, and it's 5 stars forever. That's just how it is. The next book that I reread, another one of my favorites, is Small Spaces by Catherine Arden. This is the first book in a 4-book series set in Vermont. They follow the seasons. The first book is set during the fall. This particular one, actually the series in general, but this particular one specifically, is following a young girl named Ollie. She has been going through a really tough time recently, as her mother died in an accident over the previous year, and her father are really kind of going through it. Her dad's trying to like connect with her and stuff, but she's just kind of closed herself off a little bit from him, from things that she used to love doing, from friends, from just people in general, until one day on her way home from school she sees a mysterious woman trying to throw a book into a river, and she saves the book and ends up reading it and finds that it's about these people who lived on a farm back in the 1800s, and their experiences with the very creepy smiling man. And when Ollie and her class end up going on a field trip to a local farm to just kind of appreciate Vermont's agriculture, she finds that the characters in the book were actually real people. And that means maybe some other things are real as well. It is utterly eerie. It's a middle grade novel, and even though it's like for kids, technically, this shit's scary. I think I talked about it in my video when I was talking about this book, but I would put it up there with like Goosebumps and Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Like, it's stuff that is utterly terrifying for children, but even if you're an adult, it's probably still gonna spook the fuck out of you. Even if it's not like maybe fully nightmare inducing, it's still gonna give you the creeps. You're still gonna think about it later. You know, that kind of thing. It's still a really creepy book. It's very well done in its creep factor. The spooky things that are in here are just, yeah, just the perfect level of unsettling. I also really love the relationships between characters in here, the classmates that Ollie kind of forms like shaky friendships with, like her relationship with her dad, and there's a lot of memories of her mom in here too, and seeing their relationship and their family unit. Just very heartwarming, but also a little bit heartbreaking because she doesn't have her mother anymore. And there's also a lot of heart in this, and it also, I think, is not only is it a perfect little like horror story and a story about like friendship and stuff, I think that it's also such a good book to address grief and dealing with grief, and I think it does it in such a touching, a very truly touching way that I think would be very comforting for a child, perhaps dealing with their own grief, and I think maybe it would also be good for other children who maybe aren't dealing with grief at that point in their lives, but just to help them kind of understand and empathize with others. I think it's just, yeah, I think it's such a well done book. It makes me bawl my fucking eyes out. I love it. The series itself is pretty good, but this is definitely still my favorite out of all of the books. And bonus for it is that it's set in Vermont. And as someone who grew up there and kind of wish there were more books about kids in Vermont other than like your standard like Pollyanna or I guess Understood Betsy, even though I discovered Understood Betsy just this year. If you want a more modern like kids in Vermont tale, this is a pretty good one for that too. Yeah. So this is also a 5-star forever. Then another book that I reread in October for my favorites video was The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. This is, yeah, another all-time favorite of mine. This is following a young boy named Nobody Owens as he grows up in a graveyard. When he was a very young toddler, a man came to his house and murdered his parents and older sister, and he was able to escape and slip into the local graveyard. And the various entities that call the graveyard home decided to basically adopt him and so put him under the protection of the graveyard. So he is kind of kept safe, he can see in the dark, he is able to be less noticed by other people. He can actually go into the crypts and stuff and visit with others and all of that. And he is essentially protected from the man who killed his family, who lurks outside of the graveyard, still looking to finish the job that he started. some of the elements of what I love about the other books are also what I love about this. There's an element of found family in here, there's friendships, there's grief, there's some grief that's being dealt with, although at different ways than the other books. This book, I guess, is dealing a little bit more with the passage of time, living your life, what happens after you're a ghost, basically, that kind of thing. Normally the topics about this kind of like, well, what happens after you die, you know, better live your life while you can, like that kind of thing, that would normally send me into a complete and utter existential crisis, which is what happened to me after I finished reading Invisible Life of Addie LaRue like last year. Had a little bit of a just bad psychological time for a little bit. But for some reason this book just doesn't do that to me, and I think maybe it's because of how things are handled, because this is a middle grade horror, so this is just kind of handled, I guess, a little bit differently because it's for a younger set of readers, and it's also very much a fairy tale kind of feel to it. This is a different take on the Jungle Book, so it has that kind of like a little bit fantastical feel to it, and I think Neil Gaiman's really good at taking things and creating his own kind of special fantastical world out of that. That feels like it's its own fairy tale, like Coraline or Ocean at the End of the Lane. He just has that ability to make that, and fairy tales aren't always like the Disney-fied cute little versions of them. Most fairy tales' origins are pretty grim, and a little bit of melancholia to it. And there's definitely some in here, but I think ultimately the book is just so incredibly beautiful, beautifully done. The world is very interesting, the characters are fairly quirky, but I just came to love them over the course of the book and love them even more while I was giving this a reread. I've mentioned it ad nauseum, but like found family is like one of my top 2 ultimate tropes ever. It brings me so much joy, but also never seems to fail to make me like really emotional at the same time, and I really love Nobody, his relationships with the others in the graveyard, with his guardian, with the friends that he makes, with his adopted parents. Like, it's so beautiful and touching and heartwarming. I also do like the little bits of lore that seem based on like lore of our world, and the more creepier aspects to it are also, it's more like maybe not like a fully scary, but like a deliciously creepy thrill. Like a light campfire story kind of a feel to them, as opposed to a, like I said with the other book, like Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, which actually scared the shit out of me as a kid. Like that kind of thing. This is more of a light creep, but still very much appreciated as part of the overall story. Loved this. Also 5 stars for forever. Like I said about these 3, if you're interested in hearing more in-depth thoughts, my in-depth thoughts about them, and also what makes them all-time favorites of mine, please check out that video. I'll leave the link at the end. I'll link it to that one. The last book that I ended up reading in October was The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. It's a fairly well-known tale. Creepy stuff at the opera in Paris. It is basically this big old opera house, yeah, in Paris, and there is a phantom that haunts the opera and has like certain demands that must be met. And he is fairly obsessed with a young up-and-coming opera singer named Christine Daae, and things are pretty complicated because the Phantom's in love with Christine. But Christine also has feelings for Raoul, the Vicomte de something. I can't speak French very well, and I don't remember. Vicomte de Chagny? Something like that. The Viscount, I think is what that translates to, right? He's childhood friends with Christine, and the two of them have feelings for each other, but again, it is complicated by the phantom that haunts the opera where she lives and works. And the phantom is a very jealous person. It's a lot different than the movie, and my only experience with it previously had been the movie, but not like the old one, although I do want to see the really old one. But I mean the one from whenever that was, the musical, starring that chick from Shameless and Gerard Butler. Emmy Rossum. Loved the movie. Still love the movie. In fact, even though I absolutely cannot stand what's his face who made the musical did later with his own thing. We're not going to talk about Love Never Dies or whatever the fuck that fan fiction shit that he wrote. We're not going to get into that. Such as to say, what I'm trying to say is this was a lot different than the movie. Raoul is palatable in the movie, not so much in here. Raoul is a whiny, swooning, annoying little spoiled brat. He is constantly like on Christine's case all the time about, don't you have feelings for me? Why don't you have feelings with me? How dare you string me along? Why is this happening? Declare your love for me. Why are you doing this to me? Blah, blah, blah. Oh my god, my dude. You are a walking red flag. He is so awful. And not that the Phantom is any better, to be completely honest. He's not. The man's a psychopath. He delights in torture, by the way. That was not really in the movie. How things are brought up in here is a lot more subtler. It's like it just tries to keep things vague until it reveals, oh my god, how he was, when it's like in the movie when things were brought up or scenes happened. But overall though, honestly, I think all of them were not great. I wasn't fully impressed with Christine either, and I actually really feel for her in the movie and really like her in the movie, and I started out feeling that way in the book, but over the course of it I just ended up not really caring for her either, because she just seems such a wishy-washy character, and I don't know what I was expecting, but I think ultimately what I was anticipating in my reading of this was not really what I got. And that's probably because, like I said, I've watched the musical so many times that I don't know, it feels weird, I guess, to read the original. Like I said, the Phantom, he's not great, and I don't know, I know people that are like think he's the greatest, and I'm like, it doesn't compute to me because the man likes to torture people, and I don't know. I'm like, revenge. I can get behind a good revenge plot as much as the next girl. Like, I've already discussed previously my love for Edmond Dantes, but like, I don't think I can't get behind a guy who has a whole kitted out torture chamber that he regularly subjects people to. Like, it's just not my, I'm not on board with that. So I think it's really his relationship with Christine is really troubling. And I think that actually a lot of guys' relationships with Christine is really troubling because Raoul is really not that much better. He's just a different kind of person set out to control her. I kind of wish that she would, I don't know, find her own happiness away from any chuckle fucks. But that's not how an old-timey classic novel is going to really go. But even though I did not enjoy the characters, in fact, I don't think I really liked any character in this book at all. I found all of them to be varying degrees of ridiculous or detestable. I actually really still enjoyed reading this, which is mostly unheard of for me because the majority of the time when I can't stand characters, especially if they were like the main characters, I really don't like the book, or I end up DNFing it depending on, you know, how the book's going. But I made my way through this. I enjoyed it. I think it was partially because I just wanted to see where the hell this thing was gonna go next. It was set up in a very interesting way. I mean, there was some foreshadowing and stuff because this is being written as like an account that someone has written much later, and they've gone back and done like interviews and spoken with different people, and they're writing up their account of what really happened at the opera, like that kind of thing. A couple of things were stated or foreshadowed that was going to happen, and so there wasn't really a surprise, but the twists and turns to get there were still fascinating, and I was just anticipating like what really is around the next corner, what's going to happen next. And I also really liked the way that this was written. It was written in a very kind of casual, chatty manner that I also was not anticipating. Oftentimes with older classics like this, there's a certain way things are worded. You know, there just seems to be a lot of metaphor and a very, maybe not really complicated, but a very wordy way that people and places are described and situations are worded and things like that. There's a very, you can usually tell a classic because of how things are worded. Just a little bit more complicated and a little bit more elevated sounding, I guess, than like more modern works. I'm thinking like Jane Austen and Charles Dickens and Alexandre Dumas. I'm thinking like those kind of like the ways that they put sentences together. And while you can tell this is an older book just because of some views and because of how things are worded in here, the tone, not the tone, the word choice was different. It was very much, yeah, like I said, a more chatty kind of book. Like the experience of reading this book felt cozy and intimate, kind of like worded it in like my Goodreads review, that is basically it kind of felt like I was being told this story, like this, I was hearing the gossip, like I was at a party and the person who had all the deets was like, you know, partially behind a fan with a sherry glass in their other hand, and we were, you know, sequestered in a corner, and they were like letting me in on the hot gossip about like the shit that happened at the Opera Garnier. Like, that's kind of what it felt like. It felt like a very intimate, gossipy story that I was being casually told, and I really enjoyed that. Like, I liked that kind of very chatty tone. I found it to be really entertaining, and that's what made me get through this book and want to get through this book, despite the fact that I really didn't like anybody in it, except maybe the narrator, I guess. And it also is what ultimately made me rate this 4 stars, because I had a good time reading this. And I do have to say, things happen, but it feels like not a lot's happening until the last couple of chapters of this book, when the action really picks up. And those couple of chapters, like, that is some really good action. And I think probably my most favorite part of the book, besides just the chatty nature of it, was also getting a look at the behind the scenes of the opera. So it's not just like the boxes, although we went into that a little bit, like the audience boxes and stuff in the theater and the stage and everything, but we also got into the backstage rooms, the dressing rooms, the offices. Hey, let's go into underground, under the stage, the area where the people who run all like the heat and the lighting and stuff like that, where all of they are. Let's go into like secret passageways. Let's go into like the maze of under the world underneath the opera, like the maze of everything where people live and work and where the Phantom resides. Like all of that, the whole look at that, awesome, fascinating, loved it. The Opera Garnier is a real place. I realized when I finished reading this that I had actually never bothered to look up what the real opera house is. I just kind of took whatever is in the movie as like, oh, that's the place and it's probably fake. No, it's the Opera Garnier is a real place, and it is fucking magnificent and has been automatically added onto my ultimate trip bucket list if I ever manage to be rich enough to go to Europe. Awesome. You should definitely look at pictures of it because it's really cool. It's like wicked cool looking. But yeah, enjoyed this. I think maybe I do enjoy the musical more, but this is definitely worth a read. Even despite how utterly mad that Raoul makes me, I still really enjoyed my time reading this and found it to be a lot of fun. And I want to find out what else Gaston Leroux has written, because I really liked this. I want to read more of his writing. So yeah, that was everything that I read in October. Had a fairly good time. Like I said, it was not really the quantity, but the quality was pretty stellar. Pretty good reading month overall. Still trying to get through some things. Enjoying what I'm into so far in November. And yeah, I hope you guys had a wonderful October and a wonderful spooky reading month, if the spookiness was what you were in for. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for always watching. If you are new here and you would like to consider subscribing, please do so. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.